Hello. Hello, you're back. I hope you enjoyed food and one another. We've got a stellar lineup this afternoon. Before we start, I want to note that my Atlantic colleagues and I are embracing the purposeful spirit of this day. So our stage is made almost entirely from repurposed wood, which will be, thank you. The one person who clapped, I'll clap too. It's going to be used again for future events. We've partnered with Common Ground Compost to ensure that all the food waste ends up at local farms and gardens. And for those of you who donated canned goods today, thank you so much for that. Your contributions will go to the New York Common Pantry. And finally, your name badges, I think you got told this when you walked in the door, but just a reminder, are meant to be planted, the whole thing. So come spring, they'll bloom and you'll have wildflowers to remind you of this wonderful, purposeful day. So now on to the afternoon. We have so much in store. We're going to hear from speakers leading corporate responsibility efforts at Tom's, L'Oreal, and Sweetgreen. But we will begin with our underwriter, the Cognizant U.S. Foundation. And for that, please welcome Julie Gerke. She's Vice President for Philanthropy at Walmart. And D.K. Sinha, President North America of Cognizant.
Hi, everybody. As you might imagine, I'm Julie Gerke. I have the pleasure of leading philanthropy at Walmart.
And I'm D.K. Sinha. I'm president of Cognizant U.S. Foundation.
And this morning, we've heard about all kinds of ways companies are working. One of the things that we haven't necessarily covered is how multiple companies are working together to create change. So we're excited to be here on behalf of Microsoft, Walmart, and Cognizant to think about how we can work together to really invest in something that's important to all of us.
And it is no secret that technology has changed every aspect of our lives, and the jobs of today and tomorrow require deep technology, training, and education. In just 10 years, we expect about 50 million people to fill the technology jobs. That's quite a big number. And preparing today's workforce to thrive in 21st century jobs, it is paramount to the success of our workforce that we train them in technology relevant in 21st century.
So one of the things that brought these three companies together are a shared set of questions we're grappling with. How do we make future growth inclusive? How do we prepare a workforce for 21st century jobs? How do we really make sure that our workforces reflect the diversity from Bentonville to Baltimore to Billings, Montana? And that's a real challenge, particularly when it comes to technology. And so we're excited to talk about an investment we're each making.
So earlier today, the Cognizant U.S. Foundation, Walmart.org, and Microsoft Philanthropies announced $3 million in grant to CodePath.org, an organization working to address this issue head-on. With this funding, CodePath.org will redefine computer science education on 152 and 4-year college campuses across the country, delivering industry-informed computer science curriculum and creating pathways to technology jobs for 7,000 folks across the country. But before we turn our time over to the leader of this innovative organization, let us say that this issue is bigger than our three companies. We cannot do this alone. We need employers across the globe to stand together to make this an issue of utmost importance and priority and join us in this effort. We are here today to help realize this vision, and I have a feeling that once you meet Michael, you'll be convinced that this is the right cause and right way to go about it. So please welcome me in joining Michael, CEO of CodePath.org.
Thank you.
Okay. All yours.
Thank you. So we're at risk of a huge wealth of talent not being able to participate in the opportunities of the future of work. Software development is predicted to be among the fastest growing professions over the next 10 years. Demand for computer science scientists now exceeds qualified applicants by almost 1 million. But unfortunately, we're leaving talent on the table. Black and Latinx students graduate or major in CS at roughly the same rate as their white peers. But software developers are just 3.9% Black and 5.3% Latinx. As soon as we open the door to underrepresented minorities, the tech talent pipeline ends up pushing them out. If the tech talent pipeline isn't working, we decided that we were going to rebuild that pipeline. We've built a model with the potential to scale high-quality CS education across every campus. We're working with existing campus infrastructure and also partnering with employers. Our courses rest on 4 pillars. They're industry relevant. We work with engineers across the industry, and in order to improve our open source curricula constantly. Our courses are widely accessible. Historically, a handful of elite schools have monopolized tech talent and tech recruiting. And we tackle this by working with existing CS departments to plug gaps in instruction in order to make sure that students are prepared and career ready. Our programs are also personalized. Typical CS programs push students away who don't have prior coding experience. We built an engaging, personalized program where any CS student, or even anyone in this room, could take our courses and become industry ready. And most importantly, they're free, always. And not just free, but they're working. Last year, we invited 133 students from 80 schools in order to take a course and participate in our virtual career fair. Companies that participated were 2 to 3 times more likely to move students through their process than if they just found the resumes on their own and interviewed them through their standard interviewing process, 2 to 3 times. I'm inviting you to join us today by doing one of 3 things. We need volunteers, we need employer partners, and we need campus partners. Volunteers are the critical missing link for our students to be able to receive mentors and role models, and employer partners are the connection between employment. Lastly, employers also can play a role with helping us to expand to more campuses. We expand to campuses through partnering with students, professors, administrators, but then also expanding through companies and industry partners. We have a booth. Some of you I know have taken some of the swag, or maybe 1 or 2 items too many. We're gonna be there a little bit later. Join us and join Cognizant and Walmart and Microsoft in trying to redesign pathways for people to reach their full potential in technology careers. Thank you.
And now to discuss what makes a brand shine, please welcome Kylie Wright Ford, CEO of the Reputation Institute, and Scott Goodson, founder and CEO of Strawberry Frog.
Hi, everybody. We have something very special for you today. We have the Purpose Power Index, which we are going to launch for the first time here in the world. The next slide. So everyone in this room hopefully believes that it's in the interest of business and companies to drive positive change in the world. And the Harvard Business School academics have said that companies benefit from generating value by doing so. There has been a lot of buzz around the word purpose. Recently, the 181 CEOs of the United States came out and said that purpose over profits matter. Milton Friedman had it wrong. Stakeholders were not the only ones we should be thinking about. So we thought it would be valuable if we created a study to measure how consumers understand brand purpose.
Thank you. So Strawberry Frog and Reputation Institute came together to do this study, the first of its kind ever to quantify purpose. We all know the ethereal quality and the logical, intuitive definition of purpose, but it's about being bigger than profits. It's impacting society positively. And so we wanted to see if we could come up with a measurement of it. I'm the CEO of a company that does data and insights, and so we put our statisticians on this task, and we're really excited about the findings. We went to 5,700 informed general public. What that means is consumers, and we captured 17,500 ratings. So it was very rigorous in the analysis. So the drivers of purpose that we found through this study are resonance, clarity, motivation, and differentiation. So for a company to get a very strong rating on its overall purpose, it needs to be different than everyone else. 28.5% of the purpose success, as in the success of your purpose being adopted by the world, is related to the differentiation. The least important of these, although still important at almost 20%, is clarity. All of these things must happen at once for you to be successful in telling the world what you stand for. So these are the big reveal of the top 20 most purposeful brands as determined by our 5,700 folks in the study. As you can see there, it's very, very interesting because we have the disruptors. There's some brands there that you might expect, although so interesting that cleaning products take position 1 and 3. This is a comment about where we are in the world, that you have to be both sustainable in the way that you develop and produce, and you have to speak in a very human voice to the people that you're trying to reach. You'll also see some brands that have long legacies there, like Kellogg's and UPS. We think this is really unique, bringing these two types of companies together to find the top 20 most purposeful brands in the world. You're seeing it for the first time here today, so thank you for joining us.
What we found, a really interesting insight in this research, was that the brands that were at the top of the list managed to be relevant to both the right side and the left side, or let's say the Democrats and the Republican consumers across the United States. So brands, the top Republican brands were Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby, which stood for religious freedom. The top Democrat brands were REI and Tom's Shoes and Seventh Generation. A brand such as Patagonia came very high on the list, and just, I think, missed it by a fraction, but they ranked mostly on the Democratic side. The bad news is when it comes to purpose, brands have a long way to go. Only 27.4% of the consumers agree that a brand has a clear purpose. So they don't even know that this purpose exists, what we've been talking about today.
The good news, though, is that we know what leaders need to do to both do and say around their purpose. They need to do things differently. You can't say your way out of having no purpose, and you can't just have a purpose without expressing it in the world in a way that will be embraced. And so, most importantly, leaders of the companies that are very high on the purpose ranking that we've revealed today, they operate responsibly. We know, again, what this means intuitively, but they sell products and services that positively contribute to society. They don't have to be in a category that is doing something that is good for the world, but the way they do it and the way they express themselves needs to speak to the people who are going to interact with their brand. They seek to make products and services sustainably and support the welfare of the communities that they interact in.
And number 2, they communicate authentically. For example, the Patagonia ad behind me, "Don't buy this jacket." And thirdly, most importantly, they boldly activate their purpose. So many of you know the REI opt-out, where they inspired both their employees and the consumers to avoid Black Friday and go out and enjoy the outdoors. Hobby Lobby, as I mentioned, supports religious freedoms very powerfully. And SunTrust, a financial institution on our list, started a movement to combat financial stress. And that is the Purpose Power Index. Yeah.
Please welcome Atlantic staff writer Emma Green.
So I was just listening from backstage, and I think the research you all have done is so fascinating. And one of the things that shocked me when I heard is that actually some of the best well-defined brands in the United States, consumers don't actually think of them as purpose-driven. This is Netflix, this is Apple. So if companies like that don't have this association with being purpose-driven, what does it mean to be purpose-driven?
Yeah, so we talked about being bigger than profits, and that's super important to it. The purpose is really the why you exist. And you make a very good point that some of the companies that we most admire and might have high stock price valuations, et cetera, have great products and services, but increasingly people are looking to connect in a different way with brands. And Scott is in a business of creating movements. He can speak more to that, but it's really important to make that connection and have a set of ideals that people can live up to. One of the brands method on the list there, I think, is interesting because if you go to their site and you're a consumer and you're trying to think about brands that you love, you can feel it. It oozes that they have purpose. Their story is about people doing things driven by a belief system, even though they're creating products, cleaning products. We wouldn't have thought that as maybe the top of the list. And then companies like USAA, who were number 7 on the list, financial services company, they really know who they're serving and connect very deeply with the veterans and those that they serve. So they do very well as well.
I think that a lot of the issues around the thing you mentioned is that most of these purpose strategies sit in some PowerPoint somewhere, or maybe they're framed on the CEO's wall. None of the employees truly understand what it represents. They don't experience it firsthand. The community doesn't understand it. And you never really see it in any of the communications, and definitely not in the product or service experience. So there is a purpose strategy, but it's just not been activated.
One of the groups that gets talk of purpose so often is millennials, young people. This idea that companies can't just get millennials to buy their goods or services based on a good product. They actually have to have a purpose that they're selling as well. But that didn't necessarily line up with your research. Tell us about what you found about generations there.
Certainly. So generational divides can have all kinds of interesting impacts on studies, but actually the most interesting thing in this study is that it has to be way more than just about the way that you interact with the brand from a purchasing perspective. What we're capturing here is the likelihood that people will work for, support, say something positive about, and in fact the biggest net benefit to companies that have a good purpose is not about whether millennials or someone else will buy their products, it's whether they'll be welcomed into a neighborhood. So you imagine you're in a growth company and you need to expand by growing into new areas, setting up factories or whatever it is you need to do, you're going to have rebellion if you don't have a great purpose versus motivation and love. If you have a really good purpose, you'll get better talent, people will buy your products, and people will invest in you and let you in their neighborhood. So there's all these different things that are more than just a demographic cut, but it's about how people interact with brands now.
I mean, the amazing study that Kylie and Stephen and Chip have worked on revealed some myths about purpose. And the myths are around, a specific segment of the population. What's interesting here is all segments of the population have responded with an understanding of the purpose. So not just millennials, it's all different generation, A, B, C to Z.
Got it. So everybody wants.
Everyone is interested, yeah.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, as you talked about in your opening remarks, this sense of purpose can come with a little bit of caution or a little bit of challenge, perhaps, especially when it comes to those associations with politics.
Yeah.
Dick's Sporting Goods, for example, is one of the companies that you looked at. And as you all might be familiar, they have recently taken action on some of the firearms stock in their stores, trying to put limitations on that stock. And I wonder, how does that affect people's perception of the purpose of a company like Dick's Sporting Goods?
Sure. So there's always short, medium, and long-term ramifications of taking a stand. But our advice in general is at least take a stand. Diligence it really carefully before you take it, but it does pay off in the long run in terms of having a strong purpose. One of the companies that we rated very highly based on the analytical study that we did was Chick-fil-A. I was fascinated today to pick up the Wall Street Journal and read the little column down the left, you know, the one that has the highlights for the day. This is the Wall Street Journal, keep in mind, you know, business reader audience. And the fact that Chick-fil-A has changed their philanthropic giving policies was in that little column. And I thought, what a sign of the times when something about a philanthropic spending makes it into that column. And the point was that they've taken feedback, they've got a strong stance, they're closed on Sundays, they have deep roots to certain values in their company, and you may or may not agree with those values, but they're really sticking to it, and it's serving them well. People believe them.
Can there ever be negative consequences to taking a
Yes.
stand like that? So talk about that a little bit.
You can alienate people, but again, you've got to know what business you're in, who you care about the most, and what your employees care about the most, and speak to them in the ways that they will embrace. Forgive me, Scott.
What would you add?
I would say that I agree 100% with what Kylie said. I think there are brands out there that are super passionate of what they do. They are passionate about their purpose, and they don't want to be everything to everyone. So in that respect, that's kudos to them. Other brands appeal on a wider scale because they have had for many years invested in what they consider to be a purpose. Like Microsoft ranks very highly in this list. The aura of the Gates Foundation is not far from their brand. And so, you know, in that respect, they are applicable across the board.
So I just want to remind the audience at this point that we will be taking a few questions at the end with Slido, which you should be familiar with. So go ahead and put those in if you'd like, and we'll take a couple of those questions at the very end of our conversation. I want to think through what it means to have purpose, not just to one segment of potential consumers or employees, but to a broad swath of potential consumers. So how do you guide companies to think about purpose, or how would you advise them to think about purpose across income, age, gender, geography, all of these typical dividing lines in the United States?
I mean, I would say there are a couple of things to watch out for. Don't do purpose washing, which is, you know, a lot of companies have these very generic purpose strategies, either very low down or so high and unremoved from what they do that it doesn't make any sense. I think try to find an idea on the rise in culture that's happening out there that you feel is right for you and lean in on that. I mean, I thought the Talbot and Dress for Success example this morning was a wonderful example of a really wonderful, good that people could do, and it was directly related to their business. So that, to me, would be a first starting point. But also, you know, think long term. Don't think about just a tactic, one action. Think of it as a philosophy that is going to guide the organization over many, many years and inspire the employees, all the different stakeholders.
Kelly, would you have anything to add if you're advising a company on trying to have that broad appeal?
Yeah, so I would always say, why are you trying to have the broad appeal? Because that's what we're talking about here, is purpose. Is it because you can make more impact on the world? If so, I understand. Then let's diagnose what levers you need to pull. If you're just trying to have broad appeal to sell more things to people, I would again say why. We all understand the imperative for growth, but I would start there. I'm not sure that every company should be trying to have broad appeal. And in fact, one of the things that we're talking about with like taking a stand is sometimes you're going to alienate groups. But if you've chosen to specify the people who matter the most to you in terms of your stakeholders, those who will support you, those employees that you'll have in the future, and the people who've really loyal to your brand, then take a stand and own it.
That's a great point, not trying to be everything to everyone. So, you know, purpose is one of these words that I think has picked up cachet in the business world, especially in recent years, this idea that this is a way you might want to be perceived. And I wonder what you see as the next phase of companies thinking through this aspect of their mission and identity. What are the things that you hear from the best leaders in business as they're thinking through what this means for their company?
I mean, I think if you follow sort of what purpose could become, if you think of it as, let's say, a societal movement, that an organization is igniting a movement that their employees embody, that the products embody, that they stand for, then the next thing it could represent is a new leadership tool for organizational leadership. But if you go even one step further, then why couldn't you even think about movement ownership? So moving from buying an equity stake in a company to aligning your values with an equity based on a movement. You're buying into a movement that you fundamentally believe is doing right by you and your values.
Kylie, what do you see is coming next?
It's a good question. I spend my time with CEOs and communicators and CMOs talking about the things that drive their business forward and help them build trust with their clients and stakeholders. The big frontier I see is boards starting to demand to understand where the risks and opportunities are in the way that the company is operating, with purpose being at the center of it. It will be in chairman's letters. There will be like way more granular definitions of what they're going to do about that purpose. We just went through the exercise ourselves of defining our own purpose, and it is a really difficult exercise to get everyone aligned behind it, and I believe boards will be the ones to instigate that.
Working through. So we have a couple of audience questions. The first, mentioning Chick-fil-A. So this is a story that's been in the news just this week about Chick-fil-A changing its philanthropic donations. And the question is, you mentioned that Chick-fil-A is no longer donating to anti-gay groups, but you found that their anti-gay stance was purposeful. Why do you think they changed? And I just add, for those who aren't familiar with the story, Chick-fil-A has, through its philanthropic branch, donated to organizations, some of which don't have LGBT identity as a center of their mission, but may hold that same-sex marriage is wrong or does not cohere with their religious beliefs. So that's just a little bit of background. So I'll turn it over to you. Why do you think Chick-fil-A changed direction?
I won't speculate too far because we're a data company, and so what I hope they did, I hope they went out and went to the people who invest in them, the people who work for them, the communities that they're in, and found out what mattered to them. My suspicion is that as they expand into new geographies, views change, and they found that they cross different lines, and found that if they wanted to maintain a strong position in being able to attract the talent and be welcomed into the neighborhood, they looked at the data and they decided that maybe they wanted to just refine their policies a little bit. So it sounds like a wise decision to me if they used it in a data-driven way, and my suspicion is it was prompted by geographic move or something else.
So another question similarly along these lines, if a company's newly declared purpose creates an enormous backlash, should the company adjust that purpose, or does that make it seem inauthentic? What do you all think?
I mean, I think the company has to do what they believe is right for them, but I would also say they need to listen to their stakeholders. So if the leadership is sitting on the top of the company and they do something that is creating a backlash among people working in the organization, or the community, or millions of people, it's probably a good time to call Kylie and get a little more data.
Thank you, Scott. That's very nice of you.
Yeah.
That was a good plug. Final question, and this is a great note to end on. What's the biggest surprise that you all found in your research?
So first of all, just the list of companies was really interesting. We talked a lot about companies like UPS, but also Honeywell. I was flabbergasted by the familiarity levels being high enough with Honeywell because they make wonderful products, but it's not a household name. So I loved that they were existing right beside names that we would expect there, like Tom's and Warby Parker. And we can all say what Tom's and Warby Parker do if you've interacted with those brands. But I went to investigate a little further with Honeywell, and I was just delighted by what I saw. Their story now is all about the future and sustainability.
So that shows how broadly this conversation can reach across the business world. Thank you so much, Kylie and Scott. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, please welcome Amy Smith, Chief Giving Officer at Tom's, here with journalist John Donvan.
Amy, it's such a pleasure to be at the Power of Purpose with you.
My pleasure to be here.
I'll be playing a little bit the journalist role, but first want to get your story out. So for people who don't know what Tom's is and what Tom's has done and what Tom's truly innovated. Fill us in.
Yeah. So Tom's is in business to improve lives. That is our mission statement and has been from day one. Our founder, through a variety of different activities, was in Argentina. He saw that people did not have what they needed, specifically shoes. And like most of us would think we would come home and get our friends to donate their shoes and we'd send some over. And he realized that that was not a very sustainable way of going about giving back in a community that he didn't know very well or understand. And so he decided that he would start making a very popular shoe in Argentina called the alpargata. And for each pair of those we sold in the US that was getting quite to be a popular shoe, he would give a pair. And that was sort of the beginning of One for One. And I think we see it ubiquitously now across so many companies. And kind of the
One for One meaning offering shoppers
Correct.
buy one of these products, another one will be
we
donated.
will be given. Yep, one will be given, exactly. So the idea of One for One's like started with Tom's, but it has become so prevalent in so many purpose-driven companies today. And so we started with shoes. We went on to eyewear and gave sight. And then we went on to a coffee business and gave water. So we sort of kept growing, and then we needed to scale back a little bit. We had a bag and purse line for a while that gave safe birth. And so we kind of on and on in the One for One model for many, many years.
And who else has modeled themselves after your One for One model? What are some other companies?
There are quite a few. A couple that come top of mind. One Hope Wine. They consider themselves a one-for-one company, but when you buy a bottle of wine, they give a percentage of the sales to an organization of your choosing as the consumer. There's also some soap companies that do one-for-one, and so there's lots of them out there. I will say that I feel like the evolution of one-for-one is also kind of happening, where it's driven kind of from what's authentic to the company and what's that purpose that makes sense with what they're doing, whether it's one for one or not.
So logistically, how did this work? Obviously somebody's keeping track of the purchase, but then what shoes and how did the shoes get to what places around the world?
Yeah, great question. So the very first time that shoes were given, our founder, his friends and family got on a plane with some shoes and flew to Argentina and started handing them out on the back of a truck. Not best practices in international development, but what we knew to do. Since then, we have a giving department at Tom's. I'm very fortunate to have 10 people on my team that manage about 90 giving partners. So we work very closely with giving partners, and they are the ones on the ground that understand what these local communities need, where the schools that have the greatest need are. And so we give through these giving partners now. We manage those relationships through my department and really make sure that not only are they using the shoes effectively, but that they're integrating them into their existing programs. We're not just handing out shoes. We're using shoes as incentive or as other ways to engage people, maybe complete a school uniform so someone can go to school. So we have 4 silhouettes of shoes that we give. If you buy these boots, we do not give these boots. But we do give a shoe that the giving partner selects. We have a canvas shoe, we have a wet weather shoe, we have a school shoe, and then we also have an athletic shoe. So depending on the type of activity, depending on what that partner needs, depending on the time of year that they're giving it, we align their needs with that product and make sure that what we're giving them is the most valuable to them.
So what was the theory of giving a shoe? Obviously it addresses shoelessness, which your founder observed.
Correct.
Why the shoe? At that point, he was not in the shoe business. So was there a theory that that particular item would have some other repercussions?
I don't know if Blake had a theory about that when he began. We would have to ask him that. What I do know is that he was quite aware that sustainable giving and sustainable change in the world was not going to happen through gathering donations from friends, and that people really cared about what was happening in the world. And so providing them a way to give back through a purchase or through something they wanted was a really powerful way to kind of get that ball rolling.
I want to come back to that question, though. Was there some hope ultimately, as time went on, that putting shoes on people's feet would expand their opportunity to travel, to go places, to go to school?
Yeah,
to
definitely.
Weather the weather. I mean.
Yep. What we've learned in the 13 years since we've been giving shoes is that all of our giving partners they send us an annual report. How many shoes have they given? How many have they received? Where are they storing them? How are they using them? How are they integrated into their programming? All of this comes back to us on an annual basis. And there are top 3 things that every single time we get a report back, they say physical safety. So we have less injuries, we have less disease that happen by someone having a shoe to wear and navigate the terrain that they live in. They also say that it builds child self-confidence to have something brand new that is well-fitting and activity appropriate is something that many of them have never experienced. So although we may have been addressing shoelessness in the beginning, we are not giving someone their first pair of shoes any longer. We might be giving them their first pair of new shoes that is activity appropriate and right-sized for them.
Why kids? Adults need shoes too.
Yeah, it's true. I think we just started with kids because that was a connection that Blake saw when he was in Argentina. He saw children without shoes running around. We also knew that we could have great impact in the education system. So in many countries, you have to wear a school uniform. And so if you do not have a completed school uniform, which includes shoes, you're not allowed to attend school. So there were many stories of children, of 2 brothers that would share a single pair of shoes and go to school every other day. And so those were some of the ways that we were able to address the needs of children that impacted their family also in a positive way. So there's been a lot of controversy about whether or not Tom's or any other company that's giving is somehow negatively impacting a local economy, right? We're taking away dollars that
from the local shoe producer,
from a local shoe manufacturer, local or cobbler or whatever.
You've studied that, though.
We've studied that at length, and the work that we did in a singular study. And I think we're always wanting to learn more and hear the feedback of people who are interested in, like, does this work? Does this not work? Is that the impact of the amount of shoes we were giving in any singular community was not having a negative impact on the community or any business there.
Was it clearly having a demonstrable positive impact in a significant way?
We think so. We certainly think so. We've not done a study on that side of like where have we seen great impact. However, we know that more children are going to school in these communities. We know that there is less burden on a family financially for this particular piece of it. And we know that and have seen in the reporting back from our giving partners that the emotional well-being of these children that are getting shoes is very positive.
Tom's then, though, went through this period of looking hard at what you were doing and saying we need to change. So what was that process? And what about what you just discussed needed to change?
Yeah, so, I joined Tom's about 3.5 years ago and was really just sort of awestruck at the level of giving that Tom's has chosen to do. So the model is very generous. And so, the first question I asked as the leader of this team is, are we doing as much as we can with the unprecedented giving that our consumers are enabling? And so that question went to our founder first, like, hey, are there any sacred cows? Should we not even be exploring this? Is this a done deal? And he's incredibly self-aware and said, no, let's, look, if we think there's something else we should be doing, let's explore that. We explored that for a good year, kind of exploring different areas and saying, maybe we should do this or maybe we should do that. Many rabbit holes did we go down and come back up. And really kind of got to a place of saying, well, we know what we're doing is good. We know that, however, the world around us is changing. We know that the issues facing our communities are evolving. We know that people want to have an impact in their backyard. We know that the consumer is savvier than ever and is voting with their wallet every single day. And so the combination of all those things kind of put together, we said, look, we want to continue to give shoes, sight, and water, but we believe that if we add an element of the opportunity to give an impact grant in a community to a particular issue area that we know we can have meaningful impact in and resonates for our consumer, we should open the model enough that allows us to do that.
That would allow you to do what more than you were doing before?
Correct. So give direct grants to organizations. So if a shoe doesn't make sense in a particular instance, or they're not able to store the shoes or give the shoes effectively, right? We say a shoe's not given till it's on a child's foot. And there's so many things that happen between the point that we take that order to it being on the child's foot.
So by giving grants, you were looking to make the best of the expertise of organizations that were actually doing this work.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And to make sure that what we were doing was feeling modern and really important to our consumer. We are a for-profit business, and so we need to, and I think as purpose and profit companies, we should not shy away from that. We need to ensure that we can have a sustainable impact and still sustain the business itself.
So there's a question that exudes so much cynicism on my part.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering is it something, do you hear only from journalists, or are folks out there doing it? Because it assumes a cynicism on the part of the company that essentially a business model is built around making people feel good about doing a somewhat token transaction that they can later feel good about. And that it's a business model that depends on the continued poverty of a lot of people out there. Although I understand the stated goal would be to alleviate that poverty, but it's sort of saying, it's kind of the poster child type of mentality. Feel good about yourself by buying these shoes. And if there were no poor people out there, this business model wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But I just want you to take that on, the cynical question is, are you doing something cynical?
I don't think so. I wouldn't work there if I did. I do think there's some of that out there. I don't know that it's actually intentional. I think that you have to figure out what is authentic to your organization. We have a history of that from day one. You have to figure out where you can have credibility. And really, you have to surround yourself with the experts. We are not the experts and never will be. I think our choice to go to these nonprofit organizations that have deep expertise in these issue areas and support them in what they need versus saying, hey, we got some shoes, you want some? We've designed these shoes in partnership with these organizations. They have told us this is how we want to use them. This is how we want to order them. We treat these giving partners like customers, which I think is what we should do. They order on the time frame they want. They order the style that they want. They receive it when they need it the most. It goes to the schools that they indicate. We don't say, well, we really like the school over here a little better. We'll get a better, camera angle on whatever picture we're taking. It's really not that for us. Do we want to tell a story about our impact? Yes. But I think first priority is ensuring that there's impact. Second priority is ensuring that we share the story out there. I understand the skepticism, and I do think that we're still learning. We're still learning how to have the greatest impact.
It also seems to have depended in a few cases on the whim of your CEO. The first discovery, these kids need shoes, that's what the business I'm going to set up. And then the idea of going to grants, you had to appeal to him, one person, to make this decision to do this kind of help in the world. Is that problematic?
I don't know that the second was driven necessarily by our founder. I think that we did our homework to say, here's the impact we're having with shoes. Here's a way we want to evolve. Here's why we think we can have great impact in this area. So just to separate those things a little bit, I think it can be problematic if you have a founder that says, look, I have the right answer, this is what we should do. We are lucky to not have that situation. We're lucky to have a founder that is very self-aware, that is very driven to do what is best for our giving partners. We talk about our giving partners, we lift them up. we tell their story. We try to be the conduit between a consumer's desire to do something meaningful and the true need of an organization. And that's hard work.
Yeah.
It's not easy. I think some organizations that have a singular person in a CSR department have 10 people working on that question every single day.
In just a few minutes, I want to go to you for questions. And again, you can use the Slido device, and Amy's happy to answer any questions you want to put forth on this topic, and I'll keep an eye out for those. So another new direction that Tom's is taking, which is quite dramatic, is taking a stand on the issue of gun violence.
Right.
Now, I do think that there's a CEO whim in this story, so I'll let you tell it.
Okay, great. So yes, as part of this whole process to say we should be doing, we think there's an opportunity to do more than just giving shoe, sight, and water, that we should be exploring this impact grant thing. We've been doing that for about a year, and we've been doing it with our founder and with several others on my team and with some folks in the marketing department. So he's very actively involved in that process. And so we were moving toward that when the Thousand Oaks shooting happened. And so,
Can you remind people? I mean,
sure.
a little bit.
Yeah. At a nightclub in Thousand Oaks, there was a shooting. It was November 7th, I think, I want to say, and about 13 people were killed there. So
Last year, yeah.
That was last year. Yes, last November. But so many before that, so many since then, right? And the mass shooting piece, and we'll run out of time before we can talk about all the gun violence pieces, but the mass shooting piece is what's elevating the conversation about gun violence. Everyday gun violence has been happening for years and years and years in communities of color and all sorts of other places. And so suicide is the number one outcome of gun violence. 60% of gun violence is suicide. Another 23% is domestic violence. 1% is mass shooting, but it's what's bringing the conversation to the next level. So after the Thousand Oaks shooting, which is very close to our headquarters, it's very close to our founder's home, he sort of said, if not us, who? If not now, when?
I mean, he had a personal conversation with his wife.
He did.
Who was afraid to let their child go outside for a little while.
That's right. And she said, I'm not taking them to school today. Someone needs to do something, right? Okay. And so I think that's sort of the moment where Blake kind of asked himself that question. Now, he came to the organization and said, look, we're going down this other path. I think we need to lean into this, to our role in potentially ending gun violence. And we need to learn as much as we can about it. We need to do it fast. Because urgency is definitely a component of all of this. So we did that. I talked to probably 40 nonprofit organizations over the course of just a couple of months. We wanted to use the right language. We wanted to understand what the issues were. In that first phone call with an organization, right, I was expecting to hear all this stuff about mass shootings and how they have gotten so big. And we talked about, suicide for 45 minutes. And on the next call, we talked about domestic violence. And so we were getting educated as fast as we could about this issue, and decided to make a $5 million commitment to ending gun violence, which would be invested in organizations that are working toward that in a variety of different ways. It was tricky because pretty much every issue right now is political, but this one particularly is, right? And so we didn't necessarily want to get into the politics of the Second Amendment and all these other things, right? But we did say, look, 100 people a day are dying in the United States because of gun violence, and that shouldn't be okay with any of us, no matter your political disposition. We did take a stand on the fact that we thought universal background checks, along with approximately 90% of the country, should be a law. So that's a background check, not at the state level, but at the federal level. And that we felt like that was an important legislative thing that should happen, right? And so that passed the House in February. We invited our Tom's consumers to fill out a postcard to urge Congress to pass universal background checks. I didn't think hardly anyone would do it. 730,000 people signed a postcard.
What time period?
Time frame was about 3 weeks.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was, and I think it shows that people actually a little bit to your cynicism point, it shows that people, yes, they want to feel good about what they're doing, and I think that's okay. I'm actually okay with that. But they also want to engage in some of these issues. Now, they want you to make it simple for them, and they want you to find smart ways to do it, and they want you to do some of the heavy lifting for them, and I'm okay with that too. But to have 730,000 people say, yes, we believe in this, and we're behind you, and we want you to go tell the House of Representatives to do this, that was pretty powerful.
We have a question from Kelly that goes right to the next question I was going to ask you, but I'd rather take it from Kelly.
Yeah.
Kelly asks, do any of your employees disagree with the company's stances on background checks and other policies? How do you handle that?
So we certainly want to have a welcoming environment at Tom's for all employees. We are very careful to ensure that everyone is invited to the conversation, and that we did have a few employees that were like, ooh, hold on a minute, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this. I came here to give shoes. Now we're going into this other area. I'm a gun owner, right? There were sort of all those conversations. And so we just created space for people to have those conversations internally to ensure that they understood what our stance was, why we were choosing that stance, and to provide them with opportunities to talk to our giving partners, to learn about what we were investing in, to understand what that issue was in a little deeper way.
But was it seen that they needed to be educated?
That I think collectively we were getting educated about this issue.
But I'm asking a different question. Was the impression that they needed to be brought over to your
No.
your side of the issue?
Yeah, no, not at all. In fact, we offer the opportunity for people just to get together over lunch and kind of just talk about the issue, no matter what side of it that you might be on. And we try to stay away from that. The only place that we did take what you would consider a political stance is around the passing universal background checks.
And I know that you've had 730,000 postcards sent. Did you have any blowback at all from customers?
Yes, we did. So we, in the 100% total, about 75% of that was very positive. People were, this is great, we're behind you, Toms, thanks for taking this on. And in the 25%, there was about half of them that sort of was like, stay in your lane, make shoes, don't get involved in politics. And the other half of that 25% that was just sheer hatred toward anyone that might have a different opinion than everyone should have a gun.
May I interrupt to say, Hannah is sending in a question on this very topic. From a brand perspective, were you worried about choosing a polarizing issue and potentially alienating consumers? So you've just said that happened.
Yeah.
Did you think this through ahead of time?
We were worried, we were aware, but we felt as though this was the right thing to do, and we believed in the decision we were making, so we were okay with it. And it was a big conversation internally, as you can imagine. We don't want anyone to feel as though they're not welcome to be a Tom supporter, but we did feel like this particular issue in this particular instance was one that we were okay taking a stronger stand on, and I think we're seeing companies do that more and more.
With the shoe model, people buy a shoe, they know there's going to be a shoe showing up somewhere. With the gun issue, what's the interaction? What's the transaction?
Yeah, so we're trying to find simple ways to tell those stories and share them with people. What are we investing in? Who are the nonprofit partners? Where are the dollars going? How many dollars are we giving? Toward what? So for example, we took a group of our employees to Chicago. We do giving trips, which is a really special thing that if you're a Tom's employee, you get to do every 2 years. You can go and see our giving in action. So you might go to Peru and give shoes at a local school, and it's a 4 or 5 day experience. We did this in Chicago with some of our ending gun violence investments. So we went around to the organizations that we've invested in, and we saw firsthand what those dollars were doing in those local communities. And that was a great way for our employees to see it. Now we're going to take those stories, bring them to life, and share that with our customers.
So 1 for 1 was much imitated. Do you think this model is also going to be imitated? Much more complicated.
It's a little more complicated. We believe in the consumer. We think they're savvy, and we think that they're ready to take on something a little more complicated. We're trying to keep it simple, however. We're still working through what is that messaging, and we're releasing an impact report that will sort of share kind of what that history's been and where we're headed. And so that'll be a way for people to kind of really get grounded in their impact over so many years and where we're headed from here, and continue to work on how do we tell that story in a simple way.
Amy Smith, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now for a session produced by our underwriter, ServiceNow, please welcome Vice President of Global Education, Catherine Lang, and Chief Talent Officer, Pat Waters.
Yay. Wow, this is cool.
I know. These couches are pretty comfortable.
Yeah, this is awesome. So I've enjoyed the whole day.
Yeah.
And the things I've been learning about is both the what and the why of purpose. But I think what we're going to try to do in our few minutes together is talk about how to activate it, right? How does it get manifested in an organization? How do we see it playing out at ServiceNow? So ServiceNow is a very purpose-driven organization. It is part of our DNA. Our founder, Fred Luddy, actually built this company around his purpose of making work better for people, everybody. And that has been the forefront of who we are and what we do. And I believe as talent that it's for everybody, being very inclusive, allowing them to be their best selves, their most authentic selves at work. But I know I focus a lot on our employees, but Catherine, you get to focus on our ecosystem beyond the borders. So can you share a little bit more about what you do and why it's so cool about our purpose?
Yeah, I think the importance of purpose with our customers and our partners has been about using it as a way to form different relationships, to understand what are we trying to achieve together that kind of goes beyond the product they happen to have bought or the solution they're trying to put in place. And it lets us connect with our customers and partners in a different way. Part of what I need to do, though, is Michael from CodePath mentioned this earlier. There are way more tech jobs than there are people to fill them. Our customers and our partners feel this every single day. And frankly, everything we've done has been a bit of a zero-sum game in that there are people who are skilled, they have the digital skills that are needed, they have the technology skills that are needed, but they kind of get hired around from each other. So when we took our purpose and said, let's put the purpose lens on what we're trying to do, and are we really making the world of work better for people, we knew we needed to extend what we were doing and why we were doing it to a different population of future workers.
You're actually creating a talent pool for people that didn't exist before and creating opportunities. And I think that is so super cool. The war for talent is also something we've talked about. It's been in the past, it's in the present, and it's in the future. And as talent leaders and talent acquisition leaders, people think about make or buy talent. You're in the making of talent, which I appreciate, thank you. But also, the old ways in which we were looking for talent is very conservative and has limited opportunity. It's not very diverse, right? And you're fishing in the same pond all the time, the same top schools, the same areas. And so it becomes limiting, especially if you want a diverse workforce, which we all know makes a better organization. And so from your lens, non-traditional, different ways in which to make this opportunity available to all, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, we at ServiceNow went down a fairly traditional path. So we said what we want to do is we want to do the go to universities thing. Mm-hmm. And we do that, and it's a great pipeline of candidates. We do this with our partners. The partner love it. They turn it into a recruiting event. It's good for the universities because it gives their students something else to do. But we weren't seeing the scale that we needed, and we were really struggling with location, frankly, which is the people that wanted to hire people who were coming into the ServiceNow ecosystem weren't necessarily hiring in the places the universities are at. So we kind of had this light bulb moment, really driven from our purpose, that said, you know what we need to do is we need to switch this around, and we need to look at populations of individuals who wouldn't normally have access to these jobs. So we started working with nonprofit organizations, we started working with job reskilling or upskilling organizations, which changed the nature. They're very small cohorts who have immediate placement. We have 100% job placement in every single one of these programs because we work with partners who want to hire. We work with job reskilling organizations who have access to the people that need it most. And then we bring the training and the the digital literacy component of it. So a big example of that, I'm super excited about, we're working with the UK government. They approached us and said, we wanted to put a youth development program together. What they know is digital literacy is one of their hardest job entry problems. They don't know how to solve that. So we work with them. We're working with 3 of our strategic partners to help develop this program. We are working with a university that's going to develop a degree program as part of this with an apprenticeship aspect to it, so kind of a real world in the job degree studies. And it's really built on, the beginning of it is just professional skills. So how do you interview? How do you present yourself for a job? What does a meeting structure look like? We're also working with a nonprofit that is called Care Never Sleeps. That's going to give them kind of the social support. So how do you find daycare if you have children? Or how do you arrange for transportation in order to get to your job if you live in a place that doesn't have public transportation? So this is very targeted at under or unemployed individuals just coming into the job market who, for whatever social or economic reason, were not able to go to university. So that's that kind of untraditional population we talked about. We start with life skills, we move into digital literacy, the basics of how does technology work in a corporate environment, or really actually any work environment, because we know there's not a lot of jobs that doesn't require a certain amount of digital literacy. And then we take them into the ServiceNow paths, we get them technically trained, we get them certified in roles, and we get them into apprenticeship jobs at these partner companies. If they choose they don't want to go that way, we also send them into a photography route, or we send them into a creative kind of graphic design route if they'd rather go that way out of the digital literacy program. So our target is about 5,000 individuals over the next 3 years. It's a massive partnership between us, the government, our strategic partners, this university. And it really, I think, kind of goes to show people are looking for something to connect on and to come together on, to work together, that really has that kind of activating feel to it.
That's so awesome. So I have the privilege, I get to lead talent at ServiceNow, which is super cool with this purpose. And purpose-driven organizations, it's a contagious feeling if you see it activated throughout your organization, in your culture. It's like a smile. If you smile at me, I'm going to tend to smile back, and I'm going to feel that release of chemicals in my body. When you hear, to give is to receive, right? So when you're giving to the community, when you're taking what is unique position of your organization and bringing it to your ecosystem, to the community, your employees actually gain a lot out of it. It creates that community you were talking about. It creates life skills. It makes them more grateful for what they have and the journey they're on. It helps engagement, retention of talent, which I love. And we talk a lot about the power of purpose. Having a really clear purpose statement, we learned that this morning as well, like be intentional with it. It actually creates a compass for me. It helps me figure out what I'm going to do from a talent initiative standpoint. They were talking about it provides clarity, it motivates, it helps you differentiate as an organization. I think that is so important for employees, and it gives gifts back to them. And so if you think about the future of work, technology in service of people, if you think about reskilling, upskilling, and actually technology frees us up to provide more care for each other, and therefore help the world evolve in a healthier way, I think that couldn't be cooler.
Yeah.
And it's changing how we're recruiting. I know from a fact that the way we do this now has more than doubled our candidate flow coming into the organization because they see the purpose in everything we do.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway in this journey and this experience has been we are a company. We have a business. we want to run that business. But we can make connections to things that really, really matter to our business and matter to our customers, and equally matter to our employees and matter to the communities in which we're working or where people want to work. And they don't have to be in conflict. They work really well in concert with each other. And then it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then it has more meaning then for our employees, and that helps with all the things we'd like to see with our employees. Yeah.
I'm super excited. Our purpose energizes me. I know it helps us not only with our own employees, but the ecosystem which you get to play with every day, but it helps the world. And if your organization is thinking about your purpose, if you haven't got that clarity, it's worth the time and effort to do that, and talk about the stories behind it to your employees to really manifest that in your organization, because it is a gift that is worth giving. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome Danielle Azoulay, Head of CSR and Sustainability at L'Oreal USA, and Kirby Bumpus, Head of Social Impact and Inclusion at Sweetgreen. Here to lead the conversation, please welcome back Emma Green.
All right.
All right, so I was saying backstage that I think this conversation is going to be great because we have two really interesting people on stage who have these fascinating backgrounds. And I want to get into both of those, Kirby and Danielle, but I'd love for you to help us out here at the beginning about this meaning of sustainability. What is that, going beyond some of the environmental implications that we often think of, expanding that out to people and to all of the populations that you're trying to serve with your companies? How have you come to understand sustainability? Kirby?
Yeah, well, first, Emma, thank you for having us today. At Sweetgreen, we like to say that social impact and sustainability is really at the core of our business. And I think what's really interesting about us as a company is that, we were founded 12 years ago by 3 college students. And, what sets us apart is the way that we think about our supply chain and thinking about sourcing locally in season and being really thoughtful and intentional with our farmers. And so for us, when we think about sustainability, it's really right at the core of, every single ingredient that comes into our restaurant. So, we have an entire supply chain team that works directly with every single grower, every single supplier, to ensure that all of the food really meets our food ethos. And so we're measuring them on, metrics like sustainability, soil health, animal welfare, how they treat their workers and their farmers. And I just think, it kind of shows how sustainability and social impact really permeates into the business.
Danielle, what about you? What are those conversations like?
So we have this governing sort of value at L'Oreal. We say beauty for all. That's our really like the guiding North Star, our purpose. And our corporate sustainability strategy, which we launched in 2013, it's not just limited to energy, water, and waste. We really try to look at the full impacts across our value chain from a environmental and social perspective, and come up with very active programs and KPIs to make sure people are taken care of at every stage of the game. Ultimately, solving the climate crisis, we're doing that because we want to protect people, right? And I think that's, I say us as society at large. And so whether that's ensuring that all of our employees, no matter where they are in the world, have equal access to healthcare, social protection, training, or looking upstream across our value chain to women-owned businesses, LGBTQ-owned businesses, veterans, people who have disabilities. How can we look at these marginalized or disenfranchised populations and help them access work through procurement? And then we have farmer level programs. People would be maybe surprised to know that 60% of our raw materials originate from the earth. And so we have active farmer level programs on over 20 of our key raw material ingredients. And I think the biggest one we have is in Burkina Faso with our shea butter, where I think 38,000 women have accessed work through that one ingredient alone. And so we're really holistic in the way we think about our impacts really broadly.
Wow, so both of you have described the ways that your companies think about this and how important it is at all levels of your company. I think for a word like sustainability, it can sometimes remain abstract or feel like corporate speak. And I wonder if for either of you at different points in your careers, there was a moment that you had that helped you really understand, helped it really click, why something like sustainability is a value and something that you wanted to work towards.
Yeah, for me, when I first started at L'Oreal, I had been doing sustainability for about 10 years before that in the apparel sector. And one of the first meetings I had was with our head of plastics purchasing. His name is Matthew. And he walked into my office and he said, "I'm the head of plastics purchasing. Also, I hate plastic." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And, and I was like, "Oh, you're my person." And it turns out he's a diver. He's a scuba diver. And so he brings this sort of personal mission with him every single day, even as the plastics purchaser. And that conversation is just an example of all the different kinds of people throughout L'Oreal who are empowered to work on this topic and really own it from their own values. So, yeah, how about you?
It's fantastic. When I joined Sweetgreen a year and a half ago, one of the things that I was blown away by was the way that our supply chain team works very closely and hand in hand with farmers. So it's not just ensuring that they line up with our mission and values, but it's also in terms of how we actually make our salads. So we have a value chain coordinator team that has those one-to-one relationships, and they were on a tour with a farmer, looking at some of the ingredients that we already source, and the farmer kind of pointed out a field of sunchokes and said, I have this whole field of sunchokes, no one wants to buy them, people don't know what they are. Our value chain coordinator took that back to our culinary team and said, "Hey, is there anything we can do with a sunchoke? Like, have we made a salad with a sunchoke?" Of course we had not, but the culinary team took that input and they came up with what's now the miso bowl, and it has sunchokes, parsnips, carrots. They're all roasted. They have this incredible miso glaze, and it's just kind of reimagining salads and the ingredients that you can use, and knowing that sunchoke is something that's really good for the soil and something that was important for that farmer to grow just really kind of shows the 360 picture. And I think when we think about our teams, we think about that in the same way in terms of how do we ensure that our values are showing up with them. So we're very thoughtful and intentional around our policies and benefits that we provide to the team. Earlier this year, we announced 5 months parental leave for all employees, and so that hits at the corporate level as well as the store level, whether you're part-time, full-time, adoptive, foster parent, and it's just been something that has really resonated with our team.
Wow, and I'm going to take from your comments partially a call to action to go home and cook with sunchokes. So thank you for the invitation tonight. Kirby, you haven't always worked in the private sector. You also spent a number of years working on the Let's Move initiative with former First Lady Michelle Obama. Yeah. And I wonder how that work to you feels connected to the work that you're doing at Sweetgreen, and maybe more specifically, what it's like to go from the public sector, from government work on these issues, to working on them in the private sector.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think, my career in the Obama administration, both at the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the White House, was just, and will forever be one of those career highlights. But it has drastically, informed kind of my future career and has certainly impacted my role at Sweetgreen. And I think I'm incredibly fortunate to be at a company that is led by founders that genuinely want to leave the planet better than they found it. And, I think that's very hard to find in corporate America. And so I've been able to take a lot of, the lessons that I've learned working on the Let's Move initiative into Sweetgreen. One of our big focuses over the next couple of years is our Sweetgreen in Schools initiative, which is something that we had established as a food education curriculum in 2010. And then with just earlier this year, we announced a national partnership with Food Corps to not only support their hands-on learning, like cooking and gardening, and get kids engaged in where their food comes from, to set them up for healthy eating habits and success for the rest of their lives, but also this audacious goal around reimagining the school cafeteria work and building on the years and decades of work that have gone into the space, and our ability to bring our lessons learned as a restaurant company into the cafeteria space, which there are 7 times as many cafeterias as there are McDonald's in the country. And so how can we as an innovative, fast casual brand, help inform that space as well?
That's fascinating how much continuity there is there. Mm-hmm. You know, Danielle, in your work, you are in an industry that is full of packaging and wrappers and little plastic cases. And you also came out of the fashion world, and that too is a big packaging heavy world. And I wonder just how you wrap your mind around the challenge that's presented with those kinds of expectations from consumers and how things will be packaged, and how you can make a little bit of change incrementally with your work at L'Oreal to try to put a dent in some of that packaging overtake.
Yeah, it's packaging is one of these examples, or I will say waste, which is endemic also in the fashion industry, is you know, an example of really. I tell people all the time, like, I love waste, I love garbage, because to me that's dollar signs. I can find ways to sell old bulk fabric and generate revenue, and you know, all of these things, support young designers. That's programs that we implemented in my previous life. And with L'Oreal, I think the interesting thing about this, you know, it's a packaging issue which seems like it's a corporate issue, but then when you look at the system and understand the system from recyclability to even procuring the raw materials to be able to integrate post-consumer recycled content into packaging, you actually see how broken the system is, right? And so it's an opportunity for companies that have big purchasing power, that have that scale, to sort of set a target, set that value, and then be able to almost create the economic infrastructure to support it, right? So we have a goal. We signed up to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation New Plastics Economy Pledge that by 2025, all of our packaging, God bless you, all of our packaging will be, I can hear you, will be compostable, refillable, and recyclable. And so that's work that's actively underway. And one of the ways we're doing that is looking at all of our shampoos and conditioner bottles, all of our packaging that is plastic. It's mostly PET plastic. And that's pretty ubiquitous in the recycling supply chain. And so figuring out how, okay, well, where can we source that from directly in the US? And we are in kind of a weird position because also other huge food and beverage companies are setting similar goals. So now these materials that were considered waste are actually really valuable. And so it's really these systems that are shifting just by taking this goal on of integrating post-consumer recycled content. In 2017, we saved 7,000 tons of virgin plastic.
Wow.
And so it's an enormous opportunity when you're working with corporations that have that global reach. That really comes, with that comes a lot of opportunity for positive environmental and social impact.
Wow. So I want to remind you that we will take a few questions at the end of this session. So if you are thinking through questions, go ahead and put those into Slido, which you know how to use now. And we'll come back to that in just a few minutes. You know, something that strikes me, both of you are very thoughtful about the way that these kinds of initiatives can be not only good for the world, but also good for your companies. And I don't know that that's taken for granted at every company in America, that the corporate disposition is to say, this initiative will be expensive, time-consuming, complicated, expensive for our consumer. How have you thought through the pitch there about why it actually makes sense for companies to take these things on instead of sort of digging their heels in and being afraid of some of those costs?
Yeah,
Herbie?
well, I mean, I just say thank you every day that I'm at a company where the founders actually get it and care about this. I also think that being at a company that has that focus, you attract employees that care as well. And so as a mission and values driven company, you know, a lot of my people that I'm working with every single day, you know, most of whom are not on the social impact team, you know, they genuinely want to move the needle forward on all the issues that we care about. So whether it's our food education work in partnership with Food Corps or other nonprofits, or our food access work, We work with local nonprofits across the country to double SNAP benefits, which not only increases the purchasing power of the individual, but it also helps the health of the market. And when farmers know that money is coming into the market, they're more likely to show up. So it helps with recruitment and retention there. But the team loves working on this stuff. So the example I gave of the culinary team and the sunchokes, that was a creative challenge that they wanted to solve. Or our work with Food Corps, that's something that they want to get in and dig their hands into. And how can we come up with recipes and recommendations that kids are going to love? I think our company has done a really great job of making a salad cool and craveable. And how do we also get young kids excited about eating healthy and real food? And it's something that it's an all hands on deck kind of effort when it comes to social impact, whether it's sustainability, food education, or food access. And to be surrounded by a team that wants to do that is really how we get it done.
I think there's a lot of ways companies can have a positive social or environmental impact without it being super costly. Ultimately, it's developing an awareness, giving your employees an awareness, and empowering and enabling them to make better decisions every day. Our procurement team doesn't just go for the lowest cost. They have the permission to have sustainability metrics as part of the decision-making process when onboarding a new supplier or putting out an RFP. And I think that's just one example of just giving people the space to make better decisions and do things differently and a little bit more thoughtfully. You'd be surprised with what they come back with. I think one of the statistics I like that for us is we reduced our carbon emissions by 71%, but increased our production by 38%. And so you can see we've sort of decoupled the environmental impact from growth. And so I think we need to get away from a notion that being better to people and being better for the environment always costs more, because it doesn't always cost more. Sometimes it's just about doing something a little bit differently.
Wow. I'm going to turn to audience questions in just a moment, but Kirby, I would just be interested in your answer on this. Sustainability can be associated with consumers who have a lot of money. It's chic to be eco-conscious and have the right water bottle and the right shoes that will biodegrade, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of your work is thinking about how to improve public health, access to reach different kinds of populations, and use Sweetgreen's mission to really reach out to a broader segment of society. Mm-hmm. So help us connect that dot, which is the way that this conversation is not only about people who can afford to buy sustainable products, but rather can be about everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, we recognize that at the end of the day, we sell a $13 salad, and we know that our business cannot be successful in an unsuccessful community. And so that's why we're really thoughtful around the nonprofits that we partner with to bring our mission to life. So, in LA, 2 years ago, we worked with the LA Food Policy Council to renovate what was, a family-owned and operated convenience store in South LA and turn it into more of a food access hub and a safe space. And that was another one where, our team really came and brought their, subject matter expertise, whether it was the design team in terms of the aesthetics of the store, our marketing team in terms of placements of fruits and vegetables, and our, data and engineering team to bring the point of sale operation from a pencil and paper to, something that feels more like 2019, and the store owner can now predict what she needs to order when. The store has now been used for things like book clubs, birthday parties, and all kinds of community building activities. And so I think we think a little bit outside of the box in terms of how can we have an impact on communities and put our profits to good use in ways that are impactful to the neighborhoods and communities that we show up in.
So from our audience, what are the first steps for a company that wasn't founded with a strong sustainability purpose to improve its supply chain? Maybe Danielle, you could take that?
Sure. I think the first step is to really map your supply chain and understand who are the people who are the factories around the world who are making your products. I think transparency and traceability are key key pillars for a sustainable business. And it's not just about your direct footprint in your home office. It's about what's happening in all of your factories around the world. And so that I would recommend is the first step to really understanding your supply chain and do that work with your suppliers. And then you'll be able to have a better insight into what issues are material to them.
Great, and we've got another question about L'Oreal. At a large and established company like this, how do you get executives to buy in, and not just buy in, but give you money and financial backing to do these kinds of initiatives?
Well, I'm very lucky because our global CEO, Jean-Paul Agon, this is basically his mission in life. He wanted to transform this company to be we've been around for over 100 years, and he sees this as the future of this company, and is making the decisions and doing the things that need to be done in order to help L'Oreal make that transition to ensure we're around for 100 years more. So
it's maybe not such hard work.
Well, I think it's also important to know, I think we're both very fortunate in our roles that the leadership is coming from the top down, and that these are the values. But I also think it is 2019, and the world is asking, the consumer is asking for companies to be purpose-led, and for companies to put their money where their mouth is and show that they care about some of the massive problems that are happening in our world, and that they are thinking differently about their supply chain, how they treat their employees, their products. And I think you can easily make that business case no matter what industry you're in and kind of what leadership you have, just because the consumer is actually asking for it and they're voting with their dollars.
And I would layer on employees are asking for it too, right? And so if we want to be able to hire the best and the brightest talent out there, this is a non-negotiable. I can't tell you how many top talent that I end up talking to as part of their interview process, because they want to talk, they want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Spokespeople too are starting to have this. And so it's interesting to see how different people, where they sit, are using their power in different ways, and how basically their values are all aligned to this work. And that's fantastic.
So final thoughts, when you look ahead to the things that are happening on these fronts of sustainability, social impact, what do you think is next? What are the challenges that you're excited to take on? And what are you seeing peers investigate and look into?
Well, I think for me, first and foremost, on the environmental side, of course, is the climate crisis. Ultimately, I come to work every single day thinking about what I can do today to help L'Oreal move the needle on that topic. And ultimately, that topic touches people in a very, very real way. When you think about how women all over the world are disproportionately impacted will be disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. Women are our #1 consumer. They're 70% of our workforce. They're at least half of our agricultural value chain. And so women are really important to us as a beauty company, obviously. And all of the research points to systemic social and structural barriers, making climate change, reacting and adapting to climate change, even harder for women around the world.
Wow.
And so that's something that I think about anyway.
Yeah, and Kirby, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think food access is a massive one for us, and it's something that we are developing a lot of time and resources into, finding additional ways that we can, make healthy food, our product, even more accessible.
Wow, Kirby and Danielle, thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And now, to discuss purpose at scale, please welcome Julie Gerke and John Donvan.
So Julie, you were scheduled last, or not
Privilege
last.
of wrapping up the day.
Not last but not least. You were scheduled wrap up because Walmart really represents the mega exemplar of everything that we're talking about today, and if for no other reason than for the sheer scale of the company, it represents a social ecosystem and an environmental ecosystem for that matter. So just start out by giving us the size of Walmart by whatever metrics you choose.
Sure. First, thanks for having me and thanks for making it to the end of the day. Walmart has 11,000 stores around the country. around the world. We have over 2 million associates around the world. It is over $500 billion in revenue in a year. And there's not an issue we talked about today that you couldn't probably tie authentically back to our company.
What leapt out at you today as you were listening to the conversations?
I think part of what I was really thinking about, and I learned a lot today, so it's always helpful for me to listen to how companies are grappling with this. In many ways, I saw each conversation as a company thinking about a lever they can pull to make change. And that's really how we think about things, is what are the issues we have an authentic reason to be involved in the change in, and what are the levers we can pull? And so you heard everything from kind of policy positions to how you work in your supply chain to one-for-one customer engagement work. And we really use all those tools to think about with the goal of really, we aspire to change a system for better long-term impact.
Walmart's a company that used to, I think this has faded a lot, but used to suffer a lot of big city snobbery toward it, especially in cities that didn't have a Walmart and people didn't really know what they were talking about. I was impressed during Hurricane Katrina. I was working for ABC News. The hurricane happened. I couldn't fly into New Orleans, so I flew into Houston and drove to New Orleans. It was about an 8-hour trip at night. And along the route, there were at least 2 Walmarts along that route. And my crew and I needed supplies and stuff, so we went into Walmart. And Walmart was in the middle of a rescue effort at that point. Yeah. They were like, they were staying open late. They were letting people who were fleeing New Orleans, sleep in their cars in their parking lots. And they were sending truckloads of stuff, water and things like that. And that to me said, this is not the Walmart story that most people know about. Was that typical, or was that a breakthrough? Was that a turning point?
So it is typical now, and I would say it now is thought of as the kind of beginning of our modern interpretation of our purpose. So we are one of those companies that was founded with a purpose.
What was the purpose?
The tagline, save money, live better, and this idea that people in the middle of the country deserved access to high quality goods at affordable prices. And frankly, there's stories of I had to drive to Kansas City for a broom, and those kinds of things was really at the heart of the founding, was this idea of equitable access and money going as far as possible. But Katrina, I was not with the company at that point, but I joined a couple of years later. And what the story you tell is absolutely the story that is felt internally. And the leadership team had been doing a lot of thinking about why were we perceived this way? What were the fair critiques? What were the things that maybe were misunderstood? And frankly, I think society expectations were changing. And so they'd been really in this exploration. And when Katrina happened, the story goes that the CEO at the time just said, do the right thing. This is going to overwhelm us. Decisions won't be able to be made from the center. You actually know what we stand for. We stand for serving communities. We're going to have the things people need. And you're going to need to make a lot of decisions and make the right decisions. And our
part of the decision was they don't have to buy this stuff.
They don't have to buy this stuff. There is a picture as you enter our home office now that's an artist rendering of what was an AP picture of Walmart semi-trucks lined up being escorted by emergency service personnel to get into Katrina, into New Orleans, because of our expertise in supply chain and logistics, we were able to get into the city with supplies faster than the government. And so they were escorting us in, and the kind of story is, and why that hangs there is because we now say, what would it take for us to be that company every day? And it's about 3 months after Katrina that Lee Scott, who was our CEO at the time, gave what's referred to as the 21st century leadership speech, which laid out, this is 2005, this now feels commonplace, but laid out our sustainability goals, so to be zero waste, 100% renewable, and to sell products so that people don't have to choose between affordable and sustainable, as that last panel was talking about. It called for an increase in the minimum wage. It really redefined what we felt like and the whole purpose was, this won't just be the right thing to do, it will be a good thing for the company. It will make us a stronger company.
What is stronger how? Stronger by what metric? Profit?
Yeah, so a number of things. When our strategy gets kind of boiled down to a page with the board, with our CEO, purpose is at the top, save money, people live better, we've got our values, we've got kind of where we play and how we play. But at the bottom of all of that, it says, to create shared value for associates, shareholders, stakeholders, customers. And so it really is this idea that everybody needs to benefit. And so in sustainability, there are a number of things that don't have to choose between the right thing to do and something that helps your bottom line. When you reduce waste, you often save money.
Well, that was another, sort of Walmart epiphany moment for me. I forget what state I was in, but again, it was a relatively rural area, and I needed to shoot an overview of the community, and I climbed a hill, and right below us was a Walmart, and the roof, one side to the other, this was about 12, 15 years ago, covered with solar panels.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
Oh, that was part of the speech. I mean, we are one of the largest, and every year it changes a little bit, but one of the largest consumers of solar. So I spend time in our philanthropy, but also with the business. And solar and renewable energies are a great example of where we don't invest philanthropically because our largest leverage is our purchasing power. Mm-hmm. By purchasing at that scale, using it, we change the market and make it more affordable for all. And that market needs to work. And so really thinking about what levers you have at your disposal and by doing this in certain ways, whether it's impact investing, whether it's pure capital investments, whether it's philanthropy, what are you creating in that market and how can you reshape it to create better outcomes?
And your job title is what exactly?
Vice President of Philanthropy.
Okay, most of us think philanthropy is giving away money.
Sure.
But you're talking the sustainability, using solar panels, changing the product. That's not exactly the traditional notion of philanthropy.
No, and so I spend about half my time with the company on shared value initiatives and helping, because that's embedded in the business. Yes, we're a team of about 60, but in many ways that work is embedded in each buyer. If we want to go talk about deforestation, I'm going to go to the beef buyer. I'm going to go to, because it's their job to really think about how we sustainably source beef that doesn't cause deforestation. And so it becomes that person's job, and I'm just the consultant helping think about it and measure it and all those things, the team that I'm on. And then we think about where are their market failures. So as big as Walmart is, we can do a lot. But it's not going to solve everything. And then we engage our suppliers and think about how do we really lead a movement of businesses in our ecosystem? Mm-hmm. How do we create additional partnerships so that that scale is even bigger? But then, frankly, the problems we face are more complex than that. And so often we end up thinking about, okay, that gets us pretty far, but there's still a market failure. There's still a system gap that keeps us from being healthy. And that's where we invest our philanthropy, to make it all work together.
So I was looking up Sam Walton's past, the founder, started the company in 1962. In 1992, he wrote about philanthropy, and he explicitly said, that's not what we do. I think his language was, we are not really and should not be in the charity business. Yeah. So what happened?
I think it would be a both and these days. And I think, he really did believe that we should be creating business models. The Waltons and Walmart have always had kind of a long-term orientation. So this idea that the social, environmental, and economic outcomes converge at the right period.
He believed in win-win.
Yeah, he believed in win-wins. He believed when communities thrived, the company thrived. Yeah. He believed there was this intertwined nature of company success and community success. I think today we see how much those systems are often broken and know that we need to bring every tool at our disposal. And when philanthropy is the right one to be a part of it, we use it.
Is there any sense that Walmart is making up for harm that it's done? And again, there's been all kinds of issues over the years. And again, going to my experience, I'm currently producing a documentary set in a small town in the South, and its beautiful downtown area is no longer beautiful. That's not just because of the Walmart that moved into town. There was also, 15 years ago, the process began when there was a shopping mall was built about 25 miles away. It began to die, but then Walmart came in and the downtown is gone. Yeah. That's a repeated story that I think is valid. And my question is there any sense in which Walmart has found this impulse in the belief that it needs to compensate for harm done?
So I think that we know that any business has externalities. And and that sounds so
Externality
inhuman.
really sounds like
yeah, it
euphemism.
sounds so, but we know that, we heard about packaging, we heard about all of these things that in our culture, and so today when you think about, others were talking about impact investing and the screening out of risk and various things, and we certainly think we want to minimize the negative, the harm that can be created in a consumer economy. But we also want to create value. And so how do you bring all that together to really make sure that, if the last panel was talking about lowering the use of plastic, so how are we redesigning packaging? All of these things have to be done. How do we create ecosystems, you were talking about small businesses, where they really can thrive because of the traffic we bring? All of that is stuff that we have to think about and frankly, maybe design in more sophisticated ways than ever before.
I want to ask members of the audience, it's time to submit questions if you'd like to, and we're going to keep talking in the meantime. So I understand that your answer to my question about whether essentially Walmart felt guilty and this was redressing wrongs, your answer was how they're doing it, but still didn't answer my question. Is that one of the reasons they're doing it? Or was it outside pressure? Was it pressure from communities? Was it the criticism that seemed like it was a bad business prospect?
Yeah, my sense is probably a little bit of all. I mean, super candidly, I think most of you in companies know that it's never kind of one thing that changes this work. And so I talked about Katrina happening in the midst of some time where the leaders were talking a lot to critics. We also do these trips where we really help our own company and our team understand issues more deeply and connect to them more personally by seeing them, experiencing them. I think that the rise of shared value and double and triple bottom line, all of these things come together along with kind of going to the purpose and articulating what would it be like to be this company every day. That starts to really build a movement that gets bigger and bigger.
So with more than 2 million employees, again, that's a small city, and that's spread around the world, not just the United States, the 2.2 million. How are you doing by your employees?
Sure.
In terms of wages, in terms of, I know that the company has had to settle lawsuits on not supporting pregnant employees and giving them accommodations that they need. Talk about some of that.
Sure. So about 5 years ago, we started what we call a real HR transformation, a workforce transformation. We've invested over $4 billion in wages over the last 4 years. But that's not all. So we think about a framework of access, stability, and mobility, and we work across all of them. With 5 generations in the workforce, you can't say employees want one thing. Each employee has a kind of different mix. And so we think about, several people this morning talked about access employment. Who do you hire? How do you make sure you're giving good opportunities? That's been everything from banning the box and hiring opportunity youth. Then you've got stability, which has been the investment in wages, has been a real, we now have for maternity leave up to 16 weeks between the 10 weeks for maternity and 6 weeks of parental leave.
Is that quite new?
That's about a year and a half old.
But again, in response to the lawsuits?
Yeah, well, no, really listening to associates. So all of this started as a transformation. It started with a conversation about wage, about skill building, and about scheduling, which were kind of some of the early things we heard. And then we do these listening tours on a regular basis to say, what's missing in this? How could we do better?
And is this philosophically of a piece with providing water in emergencies? Is this all, are these separate impulses, or is this part of the same thing?
Probably
is that
part of
your
the
area
same thing.
Philanthropy?
Yeah, so I think there's some of the same thing here. In the workforce transformation, we've reduced turnover. We have some of the lowest turnover we've had in years. We've had great customer service scores improving. So it really is designing, we built 200 academies, which are these training facilities around the country so people can drive to them. They are about 2 weeks. You spend half the time in the classroom, half the time on the floor learning. At the end of it, you have up to 19 hours you can apply to college. We have a $1 a day college program. So all of this comes together because we think that by attracting the right workforce, by building the right skills, we're moving faster. We are providing a better customer service, and we do think this is a shared value. we do see where, yes, it's a pretty big investment. There's no doubt that there's a cost to it. And frankly, when we announced it, we lost about 10% of our market cap. But over that time, as we've gained it back, the investors have said, wait, we do see that you're getting value from this. By doing this,
So
you're
did that
having
feel like
great
a scary
outcome.
gamble at the time?
I think it was well thought through with our board and our leader and our CEO. I think there was a lot of feeling that they were doing the right thing. But yeah, it's not, to go to an investor meeting and have that confidence and say this is going to take a while, but it's the right investment today and it's going to pay off. You really do count on a board that believes in it and says we're in it for the long term.
We have a question. Walmart's minimum wage is lower than many of its peers like Target and Amazon and Costco. You've been criticized for that by Senator Bernie Sanders. Sanders has suggested that you add an hourly worker to your board, to the board you were just talking about. Is that something you've considered as part of your broader advocacy program?
So we look all the time. Things like wage is looked at every 2 weeks by geography. So for instance, the competitors you outlined there have a different geographic footprint and a number of things. And where we are in the same markets, we'd be in a fairly comparable place. We're looking at what's the role of associates in the conversation. How do those ideas come up? What's in the governance? I think we're on a journey, and we're always looking at what's next and how to structure it well.
Another question, there was a shooting at a Walmart yesterday outside. 3 people died there. Walmart has taken a position very recently on assault rifles. Also, I want to talk about vaping, but talk about the decision on assault rifles.
Sure. So we were, the site of a mass shooting in August, and that is something you never want to face. And for the community of El Paso, it's really important that we call it. It was a shooting tied to hatred. It was hatred from outside their community into a store that is known for serving an incredibly diverse community and employing an incredibly diverse community. So it felt incredibly personal. That's always hard. And the first priority in a situation like that is the safety of your associates and your customers. And we faced threats and a number of things over that time that made it very complicated to navigate. But we have always had higher standards than the law around selling guns. So in 2005, we had stopped selling assault rifles. We had moved out of handguns. Later, we had followed kind of what the same things Dick's Sporting Goods, so higher wages. We required an affirmative background check as opposed to the absence of a red light. But we really said that may not be enough where we are. And this has been emphasized from the stage, but I think it's really important. We spent a lot of time talking to stakeholders across the board as we thought through this. There are people who are smarter on this than us. And so ultimately what we chose to do is to get out of a number of types of ammunition, to further reduce the types of guns we sell to really just hunting rifle type work, to call for universal background checks, to call for the debate of the assault weapons ban.
Has that hurt profits?
We said publicly we'd probably move from about 20% market share in ammunition to low single digits. Mm-hmm. It felt right for us. We also did need to honor that our history is with sportsmen and hunters. Yeah. And that still makes up a big customer population for us. So I can say, in the Post, it's pretty much exactly 50-50 fan mail and hate mail to that decision.
So you don't see pulling all guns at any point?
So part of this was a response to law enforcement and others that said we need good actors to stay in. There's a role for those in the market to set standards and make sure there are safe places following. So we did things like we have made some of the systems we use to make sure we do it to the utmost standards available to others. How do we shape a market in a way that is the most responsible?
The other recent move is taking vaping options out of the store. So the reason for that is the health concerns are serious, but the health concerns are serious for tobacco too. Yeah. You're still selling tobacco.
I think it is really looking at each market you participate in and thinking about what that is. Vaping is one that I think we exited at a time where it was really unclear what was going on. Regulation was changing. The customer it targeted might not have been the right target. I think we've seen.
How's that different from tobacco? Because we know what's going on with tobacco.
Yeah, we still have to be super responsible in that. And we've been very careful in age standards, all those things. We consider it all the time, what places we sell and what places we don't. And that is hard. And you have to think, many people today have talked about thinking about your customer, moving at the pace they can. And that's one we look at all the time.
So I think you're suggesting your customers would be upset if you stop selling tobacco.
I think we have customers who come to us for lots of things, and how you make sure you do that carefully is really something we consider all the time.
Sounds like the bottom line of today's conversation all the way.
It is.
Julie, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Purpose at scale. The power of purpose. Thank you, Julie Gerke and John Dunvan. That's a wrap. What a day. We covered rich and fertile territory. I hope you all leave here feeling invigorated, that you learned something new or were inspired by somebody you met on this stage or over lunch. Before you dash out the door, please join me in thanking the people who made this possible. They are Wells Fargo, Nestle Waters, ServiceNow, McKinsey & Company, and the Cognizant US Foundation. We're really grateful for their support, and we're also grateful for all of you. We know how precious your time is. Thank you for spending so much with us. You've been a magnificent audience. Give yourselves a round of applause. And one last request before you go. You'll get a survey from me. Please fill it out. Your feedback is enormously important to us, and we will read it all. Have a wonderful day.